"You're not welcome at Thanksgiving this year until you apologize." Those were my mother's exact words, sharp, cold, and final. I remember staring at my phone, rereading the text as if maybe I'd misunderstood. But no, the message was crystal clear. I was banned from Thanksgiving, the same Thanksgiving I'd paid for the last 5 years. "My name is Ethan, I'm 32, and I used to think family loyalty meant everything. I was wrong. Thanksgiving was supposed to be our family's sacred day, the one day we all came home, laughed too loud, and pretended we weren't a fractured mess beneath the tablecloth smiles. My parents, Linda and Mark, had always been complicated. They loved control more than they loved fairness. Especially my mother. And then there was Emily, my little sister. The golden child. The one who could do no wrong. For years, I was the one keeping the family afloat. After Dad lost his job when I was 25, I quietly stepped in. Paid the mortgage as a gift. Covered Emily's tuition when her scholarships fell through. Even bought my parents groceries every month when the credit cards got too tight. I told myself I was helping that family sticks together. But lately, something had shifted. Last Thanksgiving, I noticed my name had been conveniently erased from every story my parents told. The new house? Thanks to Dad's smart financial planning. Emily's graduate degree? She worked so hard to make it happen. My mother even laughed when I mentioned the bills I'd covered. "Oh honey, don't exaggerate," she'd said, sipping wine. I brushed it off. But deep down, resentment simmered. Then came this year's Thanksgiving, the final straw. It started 2 weeks ago. I'd had a brutal month at work, back-to-back meetings, 12-hour days, so I hadn't answered every family text. I figured they'd understand. But then Emily called me out of the blue. "Mom's really upset with you, Ethan," she said. "You ignored her messages about the Thanksgiving plans." "I've been working non-stop," I replied. "What plans?" "Well, we decided to host it at my new house this year." "You're bringing dessert?" My stomach twisted. Her new house, the one I'd made the down payment for last summer. Still, I kept my voice calm. "Okay, that's fine. I can bring dessert." "What does Mom want?" Emily hesitated. "Actually, she doesn't want you to come. Not unless you apologize." I froze. "Apologize? For what?" "She says you've been disrespectful. That you think money gives you a say in everything." I laughed in disbelief. "You mean the money that's been keeping all of you comfortable for the last 7 years?" "Ethan," she said softly, "you can be really condescending sometimes. Maybe just say sorry and come. It's one dinner." It was like the air had been punched out of me. One dinner? The dinner I paid for every year? The one that only existed because I made sure the bills were covered, the groceries were stocked, and everyone's debt stayed hidden? I didn't argue. I just said, "Got it." That night, I scrolled through old bank transfers, thousands sent over the years. Rent payments. Utility bills. Tuition deposits. My father's car repairs. Even their streaming subscriptions were on my card. I stared at the numbers, a cocktail of anger and betrayal rising like acid in my throat. They didn't just take advantage of me. They erased me. The next morning, Mom sent another message. "I hope you've reflected. We'll see you at Thanksgiving if you can behave." No apology. No gratitude. Just entitlement. Something inside me snapped. But I didn't reply. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. Because when you've spent your whole life being guilt-tripped into submission, silence becomes your sharpest weapon. That weekend, I met with my accountant. "I need to transfer all linked accounts to private access," I said. "Freeze any automatic payments that go to these 4 names." He looked up. "Are you sure? That's a lot of money you've been sending monthly." "I'm sure," I said. "Consider it a family vacation permanent." As I left his office, the first chill of November air hit me. For the first time in years, it felt like I could breathe. Still, part of me hoped they'd reach out, maybe realize how cruel they'd been. But days passed, and nothing. Only Emily's Instagram posts appeared, her house decorated for Thanksgiving, captioned, "So grateful for family this year, yellow heart dot." Family. Funny how that word sounds different when it stops being mutual. I stared at her post for a long time before setting my phone down. A storm was coming, they just didn't know it yet. And this time, I wasn't bringing dessert. They say betrayal doesn't happen overnight, it creeps in, one quiet red flag at a time. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. I just didn't want to see them. The first came a week after my mother's banishment message. I got an email alert from my bank, account change detected, new user added. Except I hadn't added anyone. I logged in, and there it was, my parents' joint account, the one I'd been helping with for years, had a new authorized user. Emily. She'd linked her name and email the same account I'd used to auto-pay their utilities. I felt my pulse spike. I hadn't given her access. When I called my mom, she acted like it was nothing. "Oh, Ethan, don't be dramatic," she said lightly. "Emily just needed to check a payment while we were sorting out bills. So you gave her full access to my linked account? You're always so paranoid. You help family, remember?" Her tone was syrupy sweet, the kind that made my teeth ache. Still, I tried to calm down. Maybe it really was innocent. But when I checked the transaction history later, $500 had been transferred out 2 days before. Memo: holiday prep. That was my money. I didn't confront her, not yet. Because at that point, I was still clinging to the idea that my family was just careless, not cruel. But the red flags didn't stop there. A few days later, my father called me out of nowhere. His voice was uncharacteristically cheerful. "Hey, son. Just wanted to let you know we're all set for Thanksgiving." "All set?" "I thought I wasn't invited," I said evenly. "Well, you know your mother, she gets emotional. We just want peace this year." Peace. That word had become my family's favorite excuse for pretending problems didn't exist. Then came the part that twisted the knife. "By the way," he added, "thanks for the funds. Really helps us keep things running." My heart dropped. "What funds?" "The usual transfer you set up every month. It came through right on time." I froze. I hadn't transferred anything since freezing the accounts. Which meant someone had forged my recurring transfer. I checked again that night, and sure enough, there was a new auto payment, authorized under an old email alias I hadn't used in years. The signature on file? Emily's. That's when the suspicion started to settle in my chest like a heavy weight. I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding, that Emily had made a mistake while trying to help our parents. But then I remembered the way she'd said, "Just apologize, it's one dinner." Like she was doing me a favor by letting me crawl back into their good graces. It hit me then, she wasn't just following along. She was running this. The next morning, I drove past my parents' house on my way to work. Their driveway, once home to Dad's sputtering Honda, now had a new SUV parked in it. A brand new Lexus. License plate, MLUXT. I pulled over for a moment, staring at it. A gift? From who? That night, curiosity got the better of me. I texted Emily casually. "Nice car. Congrats." She replied within seconds. "Thanks. Just a little early Christmas present to myself." The message came with a winking emoji. But I noticed something else in her reflection photo, my father standing behind her in their driveway, smiling proudly. So they'd used my money, my holiday prep money, to help Emily buy a car. And somehow, I was the one who needed to apologize. By the end of that week, I was exhausted. Not physically, but emotionally hollowed out. Every time my phone buzzed, I braced for another lie disguised as family talk. Every memory I had of helping them, every dinner, every holiday, every time I paid their bills, felt poisoned now. I stopped sleeping properly. Work meetings blurred together. I'd find myself staring at spreadsheets without seeing a single number. One night, I woke up at 3 a.m. and opened my budgeting app, the same one I'd used to track their payments. It showed a massive negative balance in one of the linked cards. Someone had overdrawn the grocery account. When I called the store, the clerk said, "Oh, your sister came in earlier today. She said you'd reimburse it." That was it, the moment the illusion shattered. They weren't just careless. They were using me. And the worst part? They didn't even feel guilty. The next morning, my mother texted again, short and smug. "We're so sorry you won't be joining us this year. It's for the best. Maybe distance will teach you humility." I stared at that message until my knuckles went white. Humility? No. What it would teach me was clarity. I looked around my quiet apartment, the first home I'd bought entirely on my own, and something in me hardened. They wanted to cut me out? Fine. But they were about to learn what life looked like without the money they'd built their comfort on. I was done being the family wallet. You ever get that feeling in your gut, the one that whispers, something's wrong, but you keep convincing yourself you're just overreacting? That's how it was with my family. Until the day I found out exactly how deep their betrayal went. It started with a phone call from my accountant. His tone was hesitant, almost apologetic. Ethan, I thought you should know something. Your parents' mortgage account is showing large deposits under your name, but they're coming from a different routing number now. My blood ran cold. From mine? I didn't send any deposits. That's what's strange, he continued. It looks like someone cloned your payment template and redirected it through another source. A joint account registered under Emily Dawson, my sister's married name. He sent me the report, and I stared at it. Every monthly mortgage payment I used to make was still being sent. Only now, instead of my account being debited, Emily had rerouted my employer's bonus distribution account, the one tied to a trust fund I'd set up for future investments. They weren't just taking my money. They were stealing it in my name. I called Emily immediately. She didn't even sound nervous. Oh, that, she said breezily. Mom said it was fine. You weren't paying attention to things anyway, so I just automated it to keep the bills from falling behind. You hacked my accounts. Don't be dramatic, Ethan. I didn't hack anything. I had the passwords you gave them to Mom ages ago when you were setting everything up. I felt my stomach twist. She was right, I had. Years ago, when Dad was unemployed and I was the responsible one. I'd trusted them. You can't just. Ethan, stop pretending you're the victim. You were barely talking to us. Mom said if you wanted to distance yourself, fine, but don't make us suffer financially because of your ego. Her words hit me like a slap. Ego? They'd stolen my money and made me the villain. When I didn't respond, she sighed and added. Look, if you're really that upset, talk to Mom. But I wouldn't bring up money again. She said if you want to be part of this family, you'll need to apologize first. Apologize? That word again. Like it was their family's favorite trick to keep me small. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk, scrolling through account histories, cross-referencing transfers, and checking old email threads. And that's when I found it. An email chain between my parents and their lawyer, one I was accidentally CC'd on when my mother used my old email address. The subject line read: Trust Fund Revision Family Agreement. I opened it, heart pounding. Inside were scanned documents, legal ones. My trust fund, the account I'd built through years of saving and investment, had been transferred into a family holdings account, CO signed by my parents and Emily. The note read: This will allow unified access to family funds, ensuring fairness and continuity should Ethan refuse further cooperation. Refuse cooperation? They'd legally restructured my assets behind my back. And it got worse. The last email from the lawyer read: Finalized. Ownership and access now shared equally. Ethan's authorization is no longer required for disbursement. In one stroke, they'd erased my name from my own future. I don't remember standing up, but suddenly I was pacing my apartment, shaking with a kind of rage I didn't recognize. How many years had I been their safety net? How many times had I said yes when I should have walked away? I thought of every bill I'd paid. Every thank you that came with a subtle dig: You're such a control freak, Ethan, or you always make us feel like we owe you. They did owe me. But they'd turned my kindness into a weapon, my trust into their personal ATM. And now, they had the audacity to ban me from Thanksgiving like I was the problem. I sat there in silence, the city lights spilling through the blinds, until something inside me broke, or maybe solidified. For years, I'd been their provider, their fixer, their emotional punching bag. Now, they were about to find out what life looked like when I stopped being any of those things. Before I went to bed, I drafted one short email, not to them, but to the lawyer who'd helped process that fraudulent transfer. Subject: Unauthorized access to private assets. Body: I am aware of the recent trust fund modification. I did not consent to this action. I'll be initiating a full investigation effective immediately. All parties involved will be contacted by my counsel. Then I hit send. The next morning, I drove to work with numb fingers gripping the steering wheel. Every song on the radio felt meaningless. Every thought, poisoned by that same question: how could they do this? Halfway through the day, I got a text from my mother. Ethan, your little outburst last night worried your sister. She said you were being aggressive on the phone. You need to calm down before you say something you regret. We'll talk after Thanksgiving if you've cooled off. That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just another subtle jab like I was some unstable child. I stared at the message until my vision blurred. Then I opened my banking app one last time, staring at every account tied to their names: utilities, rent, phone bills, grocery cards. And with one quiet motion, I hit close account on every single one. The silence after revenge is louder than the act itself. When I closed those accounts, the apartment went still, the kind of quiet that settles deep in your bones. My phone didn't buzz, the emails stopped, and for the first time in years, I wasn't tethered to the constant hum of my family's needs. But silence can be dangerous, too. It leaves space for memories. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen, the glow of the refrigerator light painting the walls blue. On the table sat a half-finished glass of whiskey and my mother's last text, the one accusing me of being aggressive. Aggressive. That word stuck in my head, echoing. When I was a kid, Mom used to say it whenever I disagreed with her. When I told her I didn't want to lend Dad my college savings, she called me ungrateful. When I said I was tired of covering Emily's rent, she said I was selfish. And when I stopped showing up to every family dinner, she said I was cold. Now, for finally standing up for myself, I was aggressive. For the first time, I saw the pattern: how they used guilt like currency, turning my generosity into obligation, and my silence into surrender. I had built their comfort. And in return, they built my cage. The turning point didn't come in some grand, cinematic moment. It came 3 days later quietly, in the form of a phone call from the bank's fraud department. "Mr. Dawson, we've completed our preliminary investigation," the agent said. "It appears your trust account was modified under falsified consent forms. We'll be pursuing this as identity fraud unless you choose to settle privately." Identity fraud. The words hit like ice water. For years, I'd let them cross lines, take, borrow, manipulate because they were family. But this wasn't family anymore. This was theft. Deliberate. Calculated. And suddenly, I realized something terrifying but liberating. They didn't love me for who I was. They loved me for what I gave. I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. Then, almost without thinking, I opened my laptop and began listing everything I'd ever paid for: every loan, every gift, every favor. I organized them by year, by person, by amount. The numbers were staggering. $182,000. That was how much I had funneled into their lives since I was 25. The list looked like a lifetime of loyalty turned into a receipt. For a moment, my throat tightened, not with anger this time, but grief. Grief for the years I'd spent trying to earn a love that should have been unconditional. Later that evening, I went for a walk. The November air was sharp and dry, the streets quiet except for the crunch of leaves under my shoes. I passed a bakery window, warm light spilling onto the sidewalk. Inside, a family sat laughing over pie. It should have hurt seeing what I'd lost. But instead, it made something in me click. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Done begging to be understood. Done proving my worth through money. Done apologizing for wanting respect. That's when I made the decision not just to cut them off financially, but to take back everything they'd built on my back. I would fight not out of vengeance, but out of self-respect. They'd turn Thanksgiving into punishment. I'd turn their comfort into consequence. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Sandra, a quiet but sharp woman who'd handled my business contracts before. "Sandra, I need your help," I said. "What kind of help?" "Family-related. Fraud, misuse of assets, and unauthorized access to trust funds." There was a pause. Then her tone shifted from polite to professional steel. "Send me everything. We'll fix this." As I gathered the documents, I felt something strange: clarity. The fog of guilt and confusion that had followed me for years finally lifted. By noon, Sandra had already filed an injunction to freeze the trust fund and flagged all connected accounts for investigation. Every shared account under their names suspended. By evening, my parents' mortgage payment bounced. Their phone plan shut off. The grocery card declined. I didn't do it out of cruelty. I did it to remind them the money wasn't theirs. It was never about revenge. It was about balance. That night, as I sat on my couch, a different kind of silence filled the room, not empty, but calm. Peaceful. For years, I'd equated peace with keeping everyone else happy. Now, I realized peace comes from choosing yourself. My phone buzzed for the first time in days, a message from Emily. What did you do? Mom's crying, Dad's furious. The accounts are frozen, we can't even pay the bills. You're destroying the family. I read it twice, then placed my phone face down. Destroying the family? No, I was just removing the foundation they'd built out of my sacrifice. They'd banished me from Thanksgiving to humble me. But in doing so, they set me free. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like their provider, or their scapegoat. I felt like me. The calm after I froze the accounts didn't last long. If anything, it sharpened everything, the way the world looked, the way people sounded when they lied. Once the fog cleared, the next step was obvious: this couldn't be emotional. It had to be meticulous, traceable, and undeniable. Revenge without a paper trail is just anger. What I wanted was truth exposed in a courtroom of facts. Step 1. Gather the receipts. I started where I always started when things mattered, with numbers. I printed every bank statement I had access to, downloaded CSVs, pulled old PDFs from my email, and rebuilt the financial timeline down to the dollar. Every automated transfer I'd ever set up, every wire, every recurring payment. I cross-referenced dates with family events, Emily's new purchases, and the car registration. When something didn't line up, a mortgage payment made after I supposedly froze transfers, a holiday prep withdrawal timed on the same day Emily posted pics of her new sofa, I highlighted it in red. Step 2. Forensics, legally. Money can be polite in its lies. So I hired a forensic accountant. Sandra introduced me to Raphael, quiet, wears the truth on his sleeve kind of guy. He took one look at my spreadsheet and nodded. You don't just have sloppy bookkeeping. You have deliberate misdirection. He began tracing routing numbers, discovering that a handful of authorized transfers had been routed through a small family-run escrow account that only existed thanks to a hurriedly filed LLC in Emily's name. Raphael pulled transaction metadata, IP addresses, timestamps, the machine names attached to authorization attempts. They all pointed to the same house, my parents'. Step 3. Collect the confessions on paper. People slip when they think no one's looking. Emails, voicemails, and text messages are brittle things. I dug through old threads and found the CC that had been my undoing, the lawyer's chain that showed the family holdings agreement. Raphael found another gold mine, an internal memo from my mother to Emily reminding her to make sure Ethan doesn't notice the trust changes. The memo was casual, almost maternal in tone, which made it worse. I saved every screenshot, every forwarded email, and timestamped them. Step 4. Record the reality. I didn't want hearsay. I wanted incontrovertible evidence. So I subpoenaed CCTV footage from the grocery store where Emily had used my linked card, and copies of the in-store receipts. I requested call logs from the cellular provider, through proper legal channels, that matched the times transfers were authorized with the phone that registered those calls. When the bank's fraud department handed over their preliminary findings, we had a stack of documents that read like a confession: forged consent forms, altered signatures, and a lawyer who had finalized paperwork without my explicit, current authorization. Step 5. Build the narrative. Evidence is cold until you tell its story. Raphael and Sandra mapped the timeline into a single, coherent narrative. Money flowed from me, money flowed into the family's lifestyle, legal documents were altered to grant them continuing access, I was isolated and painted as the aggressive one when I objected. Sandra advised me quietly, keep it factual. Emotional appeals are for the audience. We need unambiguous proof. So we built a file, legal, neat, and devastatingly simple. Step 6. Set traps that look like kindness. Not every move needed to flash red. Some of the best traps are invisible until they snap. I set up a third-party audit request for the accountant who'd handled the family's filings, framed as a routine check from a financial oversight group. I had Raphael schedule a benign mortgage verification letter that, when returned, would show the new registered payer as family holdings, signed by Emily. The bank would be compelled to respond, and their reply would be a public record of the fraud chain. Each little administrative prompt forced them to respond in ways that created more evidence. Step 7. Keep the villain comfortable. This was crucial. Emily still posted brunch pics. My mother still sent sanctimonious messages. They were confident. That confidence is a mistake in a bad play, it makes the fall louder. I never taunted them publicly. I called once, pretending confusion, and let my voice sound small and uncertain. They smelled victory and kept talking. Every smug text, every careless admission, fed the dossier. Step 8, line up the fallout. Sandra filed motions quietly, injunctions to prevent my assets from being moved, notifications to credit bureaus marking the accounts under investigation, and a civil suit drafted to recoup the sums. Raphael prepared a report suitable for presentation to the bank's compliance department and, if necessary, the state attorney. The legal machinery creaked into motion. It didn't move fast, but it moved with authority. For days, they lived in the illusion of control. Emily bought gifts, posted gratitude captions, and called me dramatic to a shocked cousin. My mother rehearsed her sorrow for anyone who'd listen. But the spreadsheet grew. The file thickened. The evidence was not only damning, it was unstoppable. The last piece I set in place was the meanest: timing. I scheduled a forensic accountant's presentation for the week after Thanksgiving, a quiet, official meeting with bank compliance and the escrow company that managed family holdings. I couldn't be there to see their faces when it all unfolded. I wouldn't be invited. That was the point. On the Monday before Thanksgiving, my mother sent a passive-aggressive email asking if I'd reconsidered coming home. I smiled and hit reply, only one line. I'll be busy that week. Someone should check the mail, you might be getting audited. Then I closed my laptop and sat very still, listening for a sound that hadn't come yet, the slow, civil thud of their world beginning to fall apart. They still felt in control. That's what made the waiting so deliciously dangerous. The trap was set. The witnesses were ready. The stage was clear. All that remained was to pull the curtain. Thanksgiving morning. For the first time in years, my calendar wasn't blocked with reminders to pay bills, confirm catering, or wire grocery money to my mother. My phone was silent, not even a happy Thanksgiving from anyone in the family. But they didn't know that, by sundown, they'd be the ones choking on the feast they'd stolen. 9 a.m. The spark ignites. Sandra texted me 3 words: "It's starting now." At that very moment, a quiet storm was brewing in my parents' driveway. 2 unmarked sedans rolled up, one from the bank's fraud division, another from the state financial investigator's office. Inside the house, my family was setting the table, linen napkins, crystal glasses, Emily's Lexus parked front and center. They were expecting cousins, friends, and neighbors. It was their turn to host the perfect Thanksgiving. Then came the knock. My mother, ever the performer, probably greeted them with her polished smile. That smile wouldn't last long. "Mrs. Dawson? We're here on behalf of the Federal Fraud Oversight Bureau. We need to discuss irregular activity in your joint accounts." She must have blinked, confused. "Irregular activity?" "Yes, ma'am. Including unauthorized access to a private trust fund under the name of Ethan Dawson." The moment my name was spoken, the facade cracked. 10:15 a.m. The unraveling. I sat in my apartment, streaming the Live Local news on my laptop, sipping coffee. Sandra had tipped off a financial journalist she knew, one who loved a good family fraud headline. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read: "Local family under investigation for misappropriation of private trust funds. Sources say funds stolen from relative." The camera didn't show their faces, but I didn't need to see. I could picture every detail: Emily pacing, my father's denial trembling at the edges, my mother's perfect hair falling out of place. They'd spent years controlling the narrative. Now, the story was telling itself. 11:30 a.m. The audit trap springs. Raphael had timed the bank's compliance meeting perfectly. While investigators questioned my family at home, the family holdings account was being dissected at the corporate level. Every signature. Every transfer. Every false consent. And then, the twist: the forged documents used to access my trust fund had Emily's digital signature embedded in the metadata. Her laptop, her IP address, her timestamps. She'd even emailed copies to the family lawyer from her own work computer. When confronted, she reportedly stammered something like, "But it was Mom's idea. She said Ethan wouldn't mind." The investigator's reply was cold, clipped. "Miss Dawson, intent doesn't change the fact that this constitutes financial fraud." By noon, the bank froze all of their personal and joint accounts, including the mortgage and the holiday prep fund. Every dollar they'd stolen was now evidence. 1 p.m. Public humiliation. The story hit social media faster than I could have imagined. Family accused of defrauding relative out of six-figure trust fund while hosting Thanksgiving dinner. Neighbors whispered. Friends texted. Even distant relatives who'd ignored me for years suddenly messaged asking if I was doing okay. Meanwhile,